Welcome, Nickolaj, to Mem Tips and Tricks. It's really nice to see you, and nice that you had time to interact with us and be in this interview.
Well, thank you, Matthias. Thanks for having me. It's a real pleasure, and we have postponed this quite a few times due to family instructions, but I'm really glad that we can finally have this. I'm excited.
Yeah. So pleasure's all mine. Yeah, summer vacation came in between, and lots of work up to the vacation, etc. So yeah, good. It finally settled. So Nickolaj, I've known you not like this, but I've known who you are for very, very many years, and that's because of some very awesome tools that you created when you started really getting known in the community. And that is, for example, the Prerequisites tool checker for Config Manager. That was one of the first tools I believe you really created and really made an impact on the community. Isn't that right?
Yeah, I think it is. I still recall when I was sitting back in our old apartments here in Stockholm, where I was sitting up late in the evenings. My wife had gone to bed, and thought, how would I make this button bigger, and what would happen if I clicked it, and all those things. I was like getting myself into Windows Forms programming in terms of, or from within PowerShell, and I had no clue what I was doing. But because I had this script-based approach before that just ran everything and outputted selection options within the console, which I didn't really like. I felt that there was an extra need for a visual interface at that point. So I started looking into the UI programming, if you want to call it that. And yeah, I think the tool has evolved quite a few times over the years. I'll be honest, I know there's a few bugs in the current existing version of it. I have not prioritized updating it because, well, just like this, what do you call it? Like a YouTube channel, like Mem Tips and Tricks. I think the Mem part gives it away a little bit.
Yeah.
But I know for a fact that there's actually a lot of people still using the tool, and I still get frequent, let's say, just messages where people says thank you for creating it. So
Wow.
still has a useful function in the community, which is great.
And just like that, creating a tool that many are using, and it just keeps coming, right? You created it once, you of course used a lot of time on the tool, but now it's out there and people is using it, and it must feel like, yeah, I would be very proud if it was my tool.
I am, to be honest. It's one of the things that I was actually sitting in our living room with an old-time friend a couple of weeks ago during the summer break, where we were just, going geek all the way through, because he's a computer nerd as myself. And we started looking through these old scripts, and I stumbled upon that script, and I started running it, and it didn't even run on this version of Windows 10, so it just failed. But I showed him the code, and we were laughing, and wow, yeah, it's brings back good memories from before, for sure.
It's good to look back and see, okay, I really have evolved since then. It's a good history book to open up.
Yeah, I think a lot of people can relate that, looking at your old script, for instance, that you wrote back in the day. That's always an excitement.
For sure. So good and bad, yes, of sure, yeah. So Nickolaj, let's get to know you better. I would like to, if not kept personal and stuff like that, you just go right over it. But age, and you said you had a wife, maybe how many kids, and you said Stockholm. Do you live there? So give us a little insight in who is Nickolaj.
In my biography, basically. Well, I'm 37 years old at this point. I have 2 small kids together with my wife, and well, to be honest, my only interest in these things, it's what I do for the community. It's what I do behind the computer. I mean, I used to play a little bit of golf, but that's the sort of activity that takes half to full day, which I don't really have the time for these days. You said it yourself, you have a lot of kids as well, or maybe not 2 being a definition of a lot, but more than me at least. So
A handful.
a handful for sure. So I mean, I've really struggled for the past 1.5, maybe 1 year, where it's hard to find the time to share all these things that I'm doing that I really would like to do. I at least managed to get the CloudLaps solution out there because I really felt that was something that was needed within the community. And now Microsoft is finally stepping up. I hope me releasing that tool or solution gave them a little push so that they understood that a lot of organizations really need this when they are going to the cloud.
You said it, CloudLaps or Labs from on-prem. That's a good resource to not have all sorts of permissions on a client. So yeah, we need that for the cloud as well. And yes, it was announced in one of the previews in Windows 11, hopefully going into 22 H2 maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but again, then you need to go to the first version of that. So stay current on Windows 11. I haven't seen it on Windows 10, for example. So for
Yeah, I
those
guess.
organizations back
Yeah, I guess
on,
we will have to see if it comes to 10 or not. My assumption is that it's going to be for 11, but well, we'll see.
yeah, there must be some
It's a little bit
interest
hard
to.
right now because I know a little bit more than I should probably say. So I'm trying to be keeping my NDA intact.
No blowing NDAs here. So yeah, let's not talk about that. But Nickolaj, I was just looking at the MS Endpoint Manager, and for those who haven't seen that website, well, you missed quite a lot. There's everything from Intune stuff to solutions. They write about Windows identity, and there's a lot of GitHub repository to go look at. And you are the founder or one of the founders of this site, right?
Yeah, exactly. So originally I ran a blog personally. I think I named it like SCC config manager or mgr.com. And back in beginning of 2017, I think me and Maurice and Terence Beggs, Maurice Daly, that is, we joined our blogs together and created the what's the sort of foundation of what MS Endpoint Manager is today. And we have added members ever since, and we are simply just driving the community forward in terms of sharing our knowledge. I mean, we have had really good guest blog writers, and I mean, it's all about the community, right? We want people. Whenever we have the time, we share what we are currently working on, or if we have built a solution, we have the platform for just putting it out there and making it available. And I think that's really important.
I think it's important too. So yes, you're right. And some of these solutions that has been built into this site, they are insane. I must say, insane. These blogs about log analytics and all these workbooks and stuff, how to get information from your clients that is not built into Intune, for example. It's absolutely amazing to have that as a template where you can develop further on these solutions. But Jan and you and Maurice and Sandy and so on, build these solutions and put it out there for us to use it and build it for our customers and for customers themselves to implement. That's just amazing. I must say, big applause to the team. And that's just some of it, right? Then there's all the solutions, the cloud BAM that you were talking about, and Labs, for example, and yeah, back in the
Modern driver
days.
management and all
Oh
those
yes,
things.
oh
Yeah, for
yes,
sure.
and back in the days when I did a lot of config manager as well, the front ends that you created.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
Wow.
I've
But
used that
when we
for a
started
couple of
talking about
customers.
it like this, it feels like I don't have any life. I should probably figure out something to do on my spare time at some point.
You need to go golf some more. No,
Yeah,
you said it yourself. That's what you do in your spare time, and obviously you're very, very talented. And yeah, thank you for that, and thanks on behalf of the whole community. I must say, thanks for all the time you spent into putting your valuable information into blocks. It's simply amazing.
I appreciate it. I mean, I just have to say, I mean, so the whole reasoning behind it is just like you're saying that we build something or put something out there that you can take and apply in your environment, right? I mean, it's the whole idea of the community from my perspective. You share what you have done, you share what you know, and then somewhere out there, there's someone who's going to be able to take what you have shared and look at it and make some adaptations to it or changes to it and be successful in their work by implementing it slightly different. And then that's just great. I mean, one great example that I realized from building the CloudLaps solutions, for instance, was that this whole idea of having some sort of triggered mechanism that's that can actually talk to a cloud service in an authenticated way. I stripped out those components. I put that separately with samples and templates and instruction how to set that up because I realized, wow, I'm actually using this in my line of work way more than just for CloudLabs. I mean, there must be a useful use case and for others to use these things. And when I shared this and was on stage on MS in the spring this year, together with Jan Kjetil, people were just like, wow, can you do these things? How can I get my hands on it? Because I could maybe tweak it a bit and do it that way instead. That would solve a real big issue for me. I'm like, yeah, awesome. That's what it's all about. I just wanted to say that basically because it warms my heart.
Yeah, I can understand that. That's really great. So I'm looking at this site, and I need to ask you something because on your site it says Chief Technical Architect with Advania and Enterprise Mobility MVP. I guess the Enterprise Mobility MVP, that's true, but what about the other thing?
Yeah, so I worked for Advani as a consultant for 50 years. I loved it there. It's a great company to work for if you're into the consulting business. But for myself, when we got our second child, the life as a consultant, it didn't really add up for me at that point in time. So I was given the opportunity for a position at Ericsson, where I'm working today. And that felt really intriguing because I had been working with them prior and I knew a lot about the company. So, and one of the reasons may also be that the company headquarters are like 5 kilometers that way. So it's pretty easy to get into the office.
Yeah,
Just kidding. But yep. So I'm currently the senior architect for the end user computing at Ericsson.
that's pretty cool. And I guess Ericsson is quite big company and global one.
Yeah, I think our public figures are approximately 130,000 something devices, slightly less users, 100 something above 1,000, but it's wow, it's really a global company. It's super exciting from a member perspective to work there because they are really forefront runners in terms of just, okay, you know what, config manager is out, for instance, Intune is in, how do we do it? And then all the things that comes with that sort of just saying and making that switch, which is what I've been involved with for the past 2 years. And it's been a ride. It's been super interesting.
Mm. So have you completed that transition, or are you in between somewhere there?
I'm not really sure how much I can say, but I can probably say that we are still running the transitioning. We have completed the whole, let's say, backend infrastructure sort of transition. At the current time, we are, let's say, switching out devices, and then you can probably figure out what happens then.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, having config manager and doing co-management, that's a good way to get started, but
Yep.
you don't get the whole way, do you? We have to let go of that old AD and have our device identity in Azure AD only, if we want modern provisioning at least.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, I mean, we explored all the options and we came to the conclusion that the Azure AD join and Intune and Autopilot, those three pillars, if you want to put it like that, that's what we wanted to bet on and go with and see if we could get that done. And well, I'll be honest, it's not been a complete success story. We've had obstacles. For instance, CloudLaps was originally developed for Ericsson. For those who didn't know, but so that those were the kind of things that we ran into. We needed some things. We built a lot of stuff. I mean, it's not an easy transition, but it's absolutely doable. And I know of other companies who have done the same sort of journey that we have done. But then again, there are still other companies out there who may not be able to take that, let's say, huge leap of faith into the cloud-only world. They want to do it slowly and steady and cloud attach the devices, and that makes fully sense to me. We just did it this way.
Yeah. Yeah, there are many possibilities here, and co-management or tenant attached is just one of many. So yeah, many of my projects is co-management and then tenant attach. Yeah, I don't know how much tenant attach is adding up, but at least a little bit service management or help desk functionality. But yeah, the ability to suddenly wipe a device, that's quite new for them in terms of getting rid of data on devices that has been stolen or lost. So that's a good thing. But yeah, nevertheless, we are going to a more simplified world when we are talking Intune, and that's the principles behind the tool. So we shouldn't look for a config manager that goes into the cloud. We should look for a more simplified and more what you could say outreaching tool that takes a lot of different kind of devices. We suddenly have Android, we have iOS, we have Mac OS, we have Windows, of course. And yeah, so how do we approach on a more simple platform when we are, we kind of build our own solutions. We build it upon config manager. You build a lot of these solutions. It was easy to do application management and et cetera, et cetera. And now you were talking about this CloudLaps, which is that's not Intune. It's Azure infrastructure, yeah. But it does solve stuff on our clients. So it is kind of endpoint management. But it's so different now having Azure and Intune and all that, where before we had config manager and an AD, and those two were working together, and that was kind of the whole solution. Yeah, of course we need network, yes, but that was the solution. So you built something upon that.
Yep.
Now we have Intune. We need to put all our applications, for example, in the cloud. and there's a limit on 8 gigabytes. Yes, we can ask support for getting bigger packages, and we can just look at the other Swedish guy who lives in USA. I forgot.
Swedish guy in the USA, Johan Arvidmark.
Johan.
Yeah.
Johan Arvidmark. He just tweeted about some very large creative suite package he created, which were, I think it was 20 gigs, and how much time it took to upload it and how he did it, etc., etc. There are some limitations, I would say.
Challenges to be
Challenges, yes.
Yeah.
So these challenges, Nickolaj.
I can tell you about one that I've been driving towards Microsoft for over 1.5 years, and I've not been successful, fortunately. But just imagine this, right? I mean, I know the whole Intune and Autopilot saga. It's about getting the user productive, right? You boot up the device, it's provisioned, the most needed applications is installed, and then onto the desktop, and everything is good. You can start Outlook or whatever, or you can start Notepad and start working, or
in Notepad.
Exactly, right. No, but the thing here is, from our perspective, I think that we at Ericsson, we may be looking at it, or maybe it's me personally, I look at it a little bit differently, because what we have done is that we have, from the vendor parts in the whole chain, they prepare everything from Autopilot perspective. And that also involves the pre-provisioning part. So what we actually get is a pre-provisioned device from the vendor already, with our configuration, with our applications, and with whatever we want to put on there, right? And when the user starts up, everything is there. But the scenario here and the limitation, in my opinion, is that because when you're doing the pre-provisioning, right, and you maybe have this enormous math lab, what's it called, like application, which is 20 gigabytes in size, and it takes time to download, takes time to install it, and that hard-coded 60-minute limit of the process for installation of execution for that application, or I can't remember actually if it's the whole download process and the installation. I'll leave that unsaid, but that hard-coded 60-minute, limitation, it's utterly frustrating, to say it in a diplomatic way. Because if you do the pre-provisioning parts, and I mean, you don't really care if it takes 4 hours, or if it takes 1, or if it takes 2. You want the stuff to be put on there from a user productivity perspective, so that they are ready with their devices and their apps right away. So that's just like you were saying before. I mean, it's one of those things that I think could be improved. It's not like there's a lot of huge amount of applications that would have this need, but there are a few out there in the world. So I mean, yeah, that's just what comes to mind when we talk about Win32 apps and limitations, because I've been really passionate about this. I've spoken with a lot of PMs about it, and CXCs and stuff, and I think it would be beneficial if that were simply just a global setting within the portal that you could set. Allow it to run for 3 hours, to put whatever limit you want to put on there. You should be the one deciding how long your provisioning takes, not someone at Microsoft at some point coded this thing and put in the value of, what's it, 3,600 seconds or something.
Yeah,
Doesn't make sense.
I agree on that. And yes, it really gives us some limitations in what we can do and what we can achieve. So either we play by the book or we don't play. That's how I see it. But Nickolaj,
Yes.
I've interviewed a couple of guys, Ben Whitmore and Eirik Haverstein, and they
Great
do
guys.
stuff with very very great guys, and they do stuff with applications. For example, Ben, he was demoing how to grab these files from Config Manager, better than
yeah.
most people, how to get data from the from Config Manager and take it out and do something with it. That's what Ben does, and he has a tool where he wants to migrate that and put it into Intune. So what I was talking to Eirik about was also this migration path, but that was more like approach going to Windows 365 and how to make these applications available in the company portal. So
great idea.
yeah, actually, but the thing is, they all spend your template on how to create Win32 apps, and now we sit here with the founder of that, and I'm very thrilled.
Yeah, I think you're maybe referencing to the IntuneWin32App PowerShell module I created.
Yes.
I'll tell you a little funny story, maybe not funny, but at least some backside information. I think it was back in December 2020, where me and Maurice were talking about, because I think that was the time when these Intune PowerShell sample scripts came out, and Dave Falkus added a few of them more, and then all of a sudden these Win32 apps scripts came out, and me and Maurice, we talked about it, and it sort of at the time, point in time, felt like we were racing towards creating a script that could put the packaged into Win32 app into Intune in the port, in the service, right? In an automated PowerShell way. And I spent, wow, quite a good amount of hours during the winter break, simply just to go through all the parts and function of the script that Dave had created to really dig into and understand what is it that it's doing, because I remember, and I still have some of the original code from Dave in there, just optimized a bit. Obviously, it's referenced with his credits to him, I think. But the funny part was I could not understand what he was doing. I was like, oh man, this guy is smart, and I felt dumb. So I sat there like to 2, 3 a.m. in the morning. At this time, I only had one child, so that could work at some point. I was like, I need to crack this, and I need to do it before Maurice. I never really told him this, so it's gonna be really funny if he recalls it. He's usually the one who recalls all these things, and it's generally just a fuss for me, but yeah, it just popped into my mind. That was fun, and that essentially led into the release of the PowerShell module, which was a really fun project. It still is, and I know that I need to update it. There's a few things that bug I introduced myself, so that I need to fix. So, but again, it's prioritization, it's family, and all these things. It's really hard these days, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah, I can relate. So,
but it's still fun, and that's what drives me.
Yeah, that's very cool. So, I was thinking maybe you would have some kind of demoing of how to solve I wouldn't call it a issue, but in larger organizations, having like, how do we deal with applications? Well, now we see the store for business moving away. We can't buy any applications in there anymore. That has been deprecated. Now, Windows Update for Business is going to be deprecated totally. That makes us only have the Windows Store. Now, we've seen on blogs that is publicly available, and we have to be careful what we talk about, but they say that this promising WinGet is going to be part of all this application management, right, in Intune, and it looks very promising. But up until now, you needed these admin permissions on the client to be able to update these applications. And that was kind of a blocker. Who is local admin on the device? I mean, we are, but a regular user, we've always said, no, 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 you don't do that.
Exactly, they shouldn't be one.
So my guess is that there will be a long period of time where we don't have one unified solution that works within MEM, where you could say, this is the approach. Put your applications in the store, they've opened up for Win32, as I've seen, XE, MSIs, etc. And I myself developed a lot of MSI packages back in the time. So I was thrilled when I saw that, because then I can build my own apps and put it into my repo and then, yeah, service my customers that way. But until then, until my dream world come true, what can we do in order to kind of build our own factory of application management?
Well, there are a few possibilities. I just want to touch upon the whole Winget thing. Ever since I read the blog post that came out a few weeks ago, I'll be honest, I'm excited and thrilled, because I would really like to understand what and see in action what it is that they're doing. However, I have a few, hopefully, concerns that are not justified, but for me, when I'm looking at Winget, right, there's tons of junk in there, like tons. And who verifies it? Anybody can put something in the community repository and just say, hey, you know what? This is WinZip or 7zip or WinRAR, whatever, and make it available. I understand there's a few sorts of validation points that it goes through, but still, this is where the private repository really comes in. But then again, if you made this enormous effort, right, to put everything into a Win32 app sort of packaged type with Intune over the last couple of years, or for how long now that you have been using Intune and distributed applications, is it worth making that effort to transition into that right now when it becomes available? Or do you need to have a solution that's going to be long-term for a few years until you are maybe ready to go and use these private Win32 Winget repositories? And is it easy? I don't honestly know. I've never published anything to a Winget repository before. So from my perspective, this is also what I'm going to demo here. I have a slightly different approach to this. I still like the whole Win32 app idea from Intune, right? With the Intune management extension, it installs the application. It's a single source of application installation. You can do any sort of installation for an application with it. And I still think that has a real use within, or what's it called, for everybody doing Intune, right? And that's not hopefully going away from what I know. So what I'm going to show you here in a few seconds is basically what I call the Intune App Factory. And it builds upon, first of all, the Intune Win32 PowerShell module, or Win32 App PowerShell module, but also something that you and I, Matthias, talked about previously. It's a middle layer in between what I'm going to show you and also the PowerShell module, because there needs to be a standardized way of talking with the PowerShell module if you're building something on top, like we are going to talk about here today. I haven't really released that middle layer part because I don't feel that it's super ready, but it's essentially a framework that wraps around the PowerShell module itself by using a JSON file as a configuration. You'll see a little bit of that within the demos here.
Nice.
Should we get going?
Yeah, let's get going with the demos.
With the demos.
Yeah.
So obviously we have a little bit of PowerShell, but what you're looking at here is essentially just a Azure Devops repository with a few set of files and folders and so forth. And the idea here is that what we can do with Azure DevOps and Azure DevOps pipelines, for instance, is that we can build an automated flow that performs the same tasks over and over and essentially ends up packaging your application for you, put it into Intune. I unfortunately don't recall the name of the person because I read a blog post where that was written last year, I think, from this person. And he really gave me the originally idea, saying, okay, you can use Azure Devops and a pipeline. You can use my PowerShell module, the IntuneWin32App module, and simply just, have it packaging, doing all the tasks for you that you would maybe have written all into one enormous script and whatever you do with it, basically. And I thought, okay, but that's great. But what if I wanted to look at, let's say, Winget as a source of information? What if I wanted to look at Aaron Parker's evergreen PowerShell module, which is fantastic, to be honest. So big applause, Aaron. Great work. What if I wanted to take that information, because that information in there is the application name, the version, the latest version of, let's say, Google Chrome, and have the download link, download the file somewhere, then process the files by simply packaging them up, putting them in a folder structure, zipping it all into the Win32 file format, and then upload that as an app in Intune. So basically, from going from where you download the file from the vendor's official URLs with the latest release of their application, download it, package it, and simply upload it. And that's the whole idea of this thing. The only maybe, let's say, small drawback of the approach that I have taken is that it uses Azure DevOps and it requires licenses, right?
Mm.
But apart from that, it suits us well, suits me well. And yeah, that's should we watch it in action before we go through and talk about different things, or should we simply just very quickly go over it, because there's a lot of PowerShell code, and I'm pretty sure people will fall asleep if we talk through it all.
Yeah, let's see it in action, because basically this is an evergreen application platform, isn't it?
It is, exactly. So if you were to look up Aaron's PowerShell module, just named Evergreen, it really gives you a lot of, what's it called, like utility-free apps, gives you the information of how to download the latest version and what the latest version is. Essentially the same thing like Winget. You can get the download URL, you can get the application, the version, all those things. And that data is what the Intune App Factory relies on, based on a configuration file, of course, what it should actually look for. And then it checks that on a schedule, it runs, and essentially it ends up packaging something for us in Intune.
Nice.
Some of the users or users, some of the viewers here would probably think, yeah, that sounds like a few vendors out there who does the same. Yeah, absolutely. It surely does. Our approach in Ericsson is slightly different with how we deal with application packages and so forth. So this is perfect for us. Hopefully, when I'm able to share this, others can use it as well if they have the same sort of needs and so forth. Because the view here is that maybe there's like a set of 30, 40 different apps that the large majority of our users they use. Then we want to be able to ensure that we have the latest version available within the company portal, but also so that we can update it for the user, right? So we don't end up in situations where users just install whatever themselves and it never gets updated and so forth. So let's look at it. We have a pipeline. Yeah, we should probably test it if there were a new version of of Notepad, because I can see here from the latest round there hasn't been a new version for quite some time. Anyway, let's look at some of these things from a more perspective. What would have happened? So the first step that runs essentially is that it's going to install a few modules on the agent, the Azure DevOps agent, which is simply just a Windows 10 VM running in Azure at this point for testing. We are then going to remove any sort of existing files from the previous run that needs to be removed so that they don't clash with each other. Then it's going to do the sort of test app files, which is looking more or less like this, based on a certain file that I'm going to show you later, the app list JSON file, the Intune framework, or the Intune App Factory framework. It has a few rules, and you basically define, okay, which applications and from what source, either evergreen or WinGet, should you check for the latest version, and compare to Intune if it's already there or not. And this is what it does. For instance, we can see Notepad++. It's going to say that it found all the required files to build or package this application. Oh yeah, actually, I forgot about this. It's been some time since I added this part. This is actually just verifying that this application has been, let's say, onboarded into an App Factory part successfully, that it contains a set of files. For instance, the icon is there. It's required to be uploaded to give a good end user experience. We also utilize PowerShell App Deployment Toolkit for all our applications. And then there's this app.json file. Is in fact the middleware that I was talking about previously, the framework around the PowerShell module. And after that, it's going to check for new app version. And this is what I was talking about previously. So we can see that Notepad++, for instance, it's looking for querying evergreen, and it found the latest version was 8.4.4. This was the download URI, and we apparently have 7 different Win32 application objects that matches Notepad++. Maybe we should clean up. And then it says that the latest version application is already published. Nothing left to do. Then it does the same for Node.js and a few others, essentially. So this is the whole idea. It runs on a schedule. It validates that the onboarding process for each app that you define in the configuration is correct. And you've done your job well, me in this case. And then when it runs, it's going to test for this.
That's
Check
quite
how
cool.
it all looks. Yeah, it's pretty cool. And the remaining steps, let's say that if this stage in the pipeline succeeded and actually said, yes, there's now 8.4.5 a version available for Notepad++, then it would jump down to the next stage in here, which would simply just download the application source files. And after that, it would go into the prepare app package folder, which would basically just put everything together in a format so that PowerShell App Deployment Toolkit works. It would update a few parameters within the deploy application script so that it creates the log file with the correct name of the application and the correct versioning. And also it will control the setup exe file, for instance, or the install.msi file, update those sort of things. And last but not least, it would simply just publish it. And if I'm really not an Azure DevOps expert, so just wondering if I could see if we have a successful run. No, it has probably gone without. Yeah, oh, before the vacation, I changed these runs to only keep the last 5, I think, because I had like multiple during testing and development. But let's see it in action just to see what happens if there has been something new going on since it ran yesterday. So
yeah,
apparently not. So what happens here is that we can see all these stages. It's not super exciting. It's going to take approximately 2 to 3 minutes. So you could probably speed this up.
So let's just talk through what happens now. You have a virtual machine in the background that spins up, or is it already running, or what happens here?
So from my understanding of Azure DevOps, I mean, you could use the Azure pipeline agents, which is something that's hosted by Microsoft. Or you could set up your own agents on a virtual machine, for instance, that's running somewhere. In our environment, it's a virtual machine running in Azure.
That's cool.
It's pretty good. It's a relatively easy setup. You run a script that Microsoft has created, a CMD script, actually, pretty funny, that does all the setup of the agent for you. Just click enter, 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 you put in a key, enter, 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 and you're basically done. So it's it's a well-documented process. It's easy to get started. Then there are a few tweaks and twerks you need to do for getting Winget to function properly on that virtual machine, and you need to ensure that some files are there and whatever not. But whenever this is, when I have the time to release this as a community solution, I will of course document those required steps to set up the agent and so forth.
Yeah. Sounds like
So
a
right
stripped down Windows version that it runs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So let's see, it did not find a new version of anything. That was annoying. Well, we can probably find. I can send over a screenshot so you can edit it into the into the video.
Yeah,
once
but
it actually finds something interesting.
We knew that would happen, but Nickolaj, then the ADO will upload this into Intune, and you will have the new version in Intune. Then what? What happens? Do you need to do anything, or is it already assigned, or what do you do?
So without going into too much of our processes, I mean, but my idea here is that automation is great, but this method is essentially relying on data that's being published by a third party. From that perspective, it is in fact the actual file download. It's coming from the official vendor of the applications. But it could be, you know, that someone publishes something really awkward within the Winget repository, for instance, or something sneaks into the other module that we're using. You never really know, right? I mean, you need to be cautious. So my idea here is that we once the application is packaged, we have a validation step within our ops teams to actually ensure that what we have put in there is actually what we expect to be there. Before the application is released into the users and for the users in the company portal app. So that, yeah, it introduces a sort of a delay, but then again, it from my perspective, I think the process overall gets, I wouldn't say like, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not a completely security vetted, a super secure solution, but at least it takes it a step upwards. Better to be a solution that we can trust and rely on.
Yeah.
I simply just wanted to go through these things because like you couldn't really see that it downloaded something. So obviously this is just code, but the whole idea here is that we have a function to ensure that we basically download the file here. And then what the solution is built around is a lot of different JSON configurations that's named accordingly to the current step that's operating. And this sort of app list part here is essentially, okay, if something needs to happen in the next stage, the information is put in here, and then it's put into the next stage's JSON file, so that the next stage can look, hey, do I have a file? Yeah, cool. Okay, process it and do whatever is needed from your perspective. Yeah, not super exciting, but it downloads. The prepare here is maybe a little bit more intriguing, but depending on what needs to be done to PowerShell App Deployment Toolkit, for instance, we replace a lot of different hard-coded variables in here with certain names like Intune app name, the app publisher, the version, the date of time when it was created, and so forth. Somewhere as well. Yeah, I felt that. I mean, we could not leave out a PowerShell App Deployment Toolkit. I mean, it's great. I'll be honest. I will say I think it's the greatest contribution to the community from an app distribution perspective ever since since the beginning of time, basically, or the beginning of the internet era.
I actually have an appointment, not settled yet, but with Dan Cunningham and all the other contributors into PS80T. I'm creating this series right now, so I'll say hi from you and tell him that.
Cool. And then obviously basing on this framework, I can talk a little bit about that as well. We make a few changes in that as well. I mean, putting in the correct detection rule logic based on versioning and so forth. And that's not the one. And then the last step is basically, it's a super long, boring script that just authenticates using the IntuneWin32 application module and starts reading the current JSON configuration file for what it needs to simply upload to Intune. And then, as you can probably see, some familiar commandlets in here.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to package it. It's going to create a requirement rule. We're going to start creating the custom requirement rules if there's any. And based on whatever is being inputted, it's going to create the required parts for it. And let's go through that boring stuff. Then we have detection rules. The same sort of logic applies there. If there's specific, let's say, registry detection rule, then it's going to create the required objects for that. We have the icon, of course, and a few logical elements or if statements based on a few requirements based on the framework. And last but not least, he simply just added to Intune. And that's it.
That's it. Simply.
Yeah. So let me just really quickly talk about the really starting point, the onboarding process. It's not very difficult. This is Notepad++, for instance. You add this segment, give it an Intune app name, what it's supposed to be named in Intune, the publisher. You decide if you want to try and find the download URL and the latest application version information and so forth from Evergreen or Winget. You give it an app ID for Evergreen that's required. And then the folder name, which is just something that the Azure Devops agent is going to utilize when it creates all the, let's say, staging folders for putting the files together and then create the IntuneWin file. And here's how you define what the executable should be named. So whatever is downloaded from, let's say, that Notepad++, whenever you download the file from there, they originally named it Notepad++ version something something. I don't want to have that, let's say, dynamic experience in this. I just want to rename that file and have it real static. So it's the setup, it's Notepad. I know it's going to be the latest version. I don't really care what it's called. I want to have it look like this. And that's it. Then you do the same for the next application and the next application and so forth.
And then you have a factory. So all of a
sudden, you end up with this excellent experience. Too many Notepad++. You can probably imagine I've been developing this solution with that application in mind. It's actually great for many reasons because they release new versions quite frequently. So it's an easy test.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I can see you actually haven't assigned the newest Notepad++ there. You are n minus many.
N minus many, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Still
But
work in progress, which is why it's not available for everybody yet, but it will be soon, hopefully.
a question that I got some time back is when we use these third-party, you could say, patching applications, is like, well, we have Notepad++ and we've made it available for all our users. Now, suddenly, thousands of our users out of the 10,000 employees, they installed it, and now this new version comes into Intune, and we need to patch these 1,000 devices. And yes, the new version should be available in Company Portal, and the new version should be pushed, but only to these 1,000 devices. And well,
how do you do that?
How do you do that?
Exactly. That's the $1 million question. So we actually thought about this back in the beginning of 2020, I think it was. And we came up with an idea that basically utilizes the requirement rules. But then we started thinking, okay, because our whole development, we have some history with our old config manager managed platform. We wanted to have the most optimized and performance performing platform, basically. So thinking of, depending on all the applications, the amount of applications you have, then running a requirement script to check if this is a requirement or not each time. I don't recall when that runs, or if it's once every time there's a new check-in from the Intune management extension. I think that's once every hour. It goes through any requirement rules to see if it's needed. That doesn't sound like optimizing performance to me, because if you have, maybe 25 applications, no problem. 100, maybe slightly getting there. But if you have upwards towards thousands, right, and the user had probably installed some of them, right, at least a good bunch of them, it would essentially lead to a case where you would be having a lot of PowerShell script running each and every second, at least, per script once an hour. And well, it all adds up. I mean, you need to, if you really want to focus on performance and battery drainage and wear and all these aspects, I mean, you need to even think about these small pieces. I recall I had a really good conversation and one MVP summit with Mike Terrell, that was working for that big bank over there in the US. And he mentioned these small, slight, really tweaks and performance gains from a config manager perspective at the time in terms of package distributions and stuff that I had never thought of, because he is in an environment where I don't know how many devices they managed at the time, but let's say the twice amount that we have at least. You need to think a little bit differently, because you cannot just, let's use PowerShell and solve the problem for now, be good with it. You need to always have the end user experience in mind, right? And understand what sort of impact am I putting on the device when I'm using this method. I really want to talk about something, but I can't. But stay tuned for very soon, I think, what's coming. Because Microsoft is aware of this, and it really is an issue, because I mean, if you have an on-demand application or an available application in the company portal, and then you want to go and install that, that's great. Then there's a new version of that. How do we, as the Intune administrators, force an update only for those devices where it's installed? We don't have that inventory. Well, we could probably build that inventory or try and query all the way through and build whatever groups with automation and stuff. And that probably works if you have 1,000 devices, but it's never going to work for 100,000 devices. And I'll give you a really good example, because I'm not sure if anyone knows, but it's not a very popular solution that I put out there. But I built something that I call Autopilot Collector, because the Autopilot experience from within the portal today Well, it's great, but not when you have 100,000 devices and more. It's hard to get a full picture of what's actually happening with all those registered device identities. So we wanted to just push that data to Log Analytics, build a workbook around it, and really see, okay, how many different device models do we have and all those things, right? And the different group tags. And the Azure function that I built for that, if I made one graph call, one, to get all the devices, yeah, it took about 3 minutes to get that data back. And that's for querying graph for 130,000 items.
Wow.
At this point.
That's crazy.
If I added in one row to make one additional call per device, it took between 6 to 8 hours to query and get all the data needed. Do you really want to do that in this environment that I have, for instance, or not that I have, but what I'm working with? No, it simply just doesn't scale. It doesn't work. So it saddens me to say, but sometimes automation cannot really help you. It's just not efficient enough.
Mm. And what you just said is also what Microsoft faces, right? They can't just throw around with information because Intune is simply calling graph and it's showing you information that you want as a endpoint administrator.
Yeah, exactly.
So think about that when you say, why can't I see all this kind of data? I had this amazing data in my config manager SQL. I had all these custom collections of hardware inventory and stuff like that. Well, if you can't have a reason why you need it, why should we put it into Intune?
Exactly. I think it's a really great example, for instance, what they have done with the new reporting capabilities, where you need to go and generate the report so that when you actually want to look at it, it's going to be fetched for you and presented within 15 seconds-ish, usually faster. I think that's a great example for understanding the computing requirements behind your simple button click, right? And the same goes for, yeah, we could just automate this and build our groups, for instance, to solve the targeting of the latest application. Yeah, well, maybe not. Well, we could probably run something that runs for 8 hours each day, but is it efficient? Is it cost efficient, for instance? Maybe, maybe not. It depends. Worthwhile thinking about at least.
Yeah, exactly. Nickolaj, it was great to see pipelines and Azure Devops and Intune App Factory and all that. It really looks nice, and I think it is a solution that many would like to use. And did you say that it is something you're going to publish at a time when you
Yes.
get time? Yes.
Yes.
Wow. Then we will look forward to that post. And yeah, that's a game changer in my opinion. And very much looking forward for you getting time to make that block or a solution. Yeah.
Whatever we call it or end up calling it, it may not be the Intune App Factory. It
No.
probably used somewhere else, but at least that's the working name of it currently.
Really good. But Nickolaj, I'll just want to thank you again for being here. It's late night now in Sweden and Denmark, and yeah, thank you very much for your time. And for the viewers, I really hope they you enjoyed it and you learned something along the way. So thank you again, Nickolaj.
Well, thank you, Matthias. Thanks for having me.